George Washington materials, turn to handout number 1. We're going to talk about a few things there. The birth of freedom. Why did the victorious colonists not simply replace King George I with another king? Stephen?
Because that would just be like the system they got out of.
Yeah, because it wasn't just the personality of King George. That was part of it, and Parliament, but they could see that that system itself lent itself to abuse. And so they wanted to go the opposite direction and not have a strong leader as the ruler. So we talked yesterday about how the Articles of Confederation were written, and that directed our country for a while, but that proved to be inadequate, and so a new constitution was written. And it was a good constitution. So is having a good constitution a guarantee that you're going to have a good government? No? Why not? Why wouldn't that be a guarantee? If you've got a good constitution, then the government should be good. Hayden, what do you think?
I don't know.
Why? Why wouldn't that ensure a good government if you have a good constitution?
Well, I think of it this way, like, if you have good parents, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're a good child.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
All right. That's a pretty good illustration. What kind of things would cause a government not to be a good government even though there's a good constitution? Michaela?
Bad leaders.
So what would make them bad leaders? If you have a good constitution, how could you have bad leaders?
Well, beliefs and like how they act on the beliefs, or the fact that maybe they're not a strong enough character to like stand up against something that's wrong, or to like do something that's right, or they don't know how to lead the country, so they don't do well at it.
So individuals might have defects in their own character that would prevent them from being a good leader. Okay, what else might lead to bad government under a good constitution? Alex?
Like the rest of the states not agreeing or complying with what the government wants, so it makes me weaker.
Okay, well, would they be going against the Constitution in that sense if they're not going along with the leadership?
I guess.
Okay, what else might cause a government to be bad even if you've got a good Constitution? Joey?
Decision making.
What do you mean?
Like if like if the can't think of it. The leaders, if they like decide on something and it like brings some good in one area but like more bad in another area. It can
So
be
poor decision making by leadership
yeah.
might bring about bad government?
Yeah.
Which may have nothing to do with the Constitution, because there are a lot of decisions that the leaders have to make that don't have anything to do with how the government is set up, but they're just making poor decisions. Okay, Michaela?
If the government is set up like in a bad way. Because like, I mean, we have the,
But isn't that what the Constitution does? It sets up the government?
yeah, but like if the Constitution is wrong.
Well, we're saying it's a good Constitution.
Yeah.
How can you have bad government if you have a good Constitution?
Because like if it's set up incorrectly, or like somebody doesn't go with what it is, it's basically like people being wrong in what they're doing.
Are you saying people might govern without following the Constitution?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, that maybe was kind of what Hayden was saying too. And that's been one of the biggest problems throughout our country's history, and especially in the last 100 years, is that we have gone away from the original intent of the Constitution. In fact, I'm going to introduce something to you now that I hadn't planned on, but just because it's come up. and that is there are two ways to understand or interpret the Constitution. One is according to its original intent or purpose. So when you read the Constitution, you ask yourself, what did they mean by that? What did our founders intend by what is written there? The other was something that was introduced, at least on a national scale, by President Woodrow Wilson. I'm sure there were others before him who thought this up. But he introduced what he called living constitution. Have you ever heard that term? A living constitution perspective is that it doesn't matter what the founding fathers meant. It doesn't matter what the words themselves mean or meant to those who wrote it. What matters is what is happening today. And how can we use the Constitution to apply to what is happening today? And reinterpret maybe even what was said to match what we desire in the government. That is the perspective of most of our government since Woodrow Wilson, and most of our Supreme Court has become more and more that way. A belief in a living Constitution. So you ask for what did the authors intend? It doesn't matter. What did the founders intend when they wrote this in the Constitution? It doesn't matter. What matters is what we want today, and what in the Constitution can be used to accomplish that. If you follow anything about the Supreme Court decisions in the last 100 years or 50 years or even 20 years, you can see where that has taken place. So that the Supreme Court has found all kinds of rights in the Constitution that were never intended. You know, the right to an abortion, the right to homosexual marriage, you know, all kinds of things have been found in the Constitution that are obviously not there from the founders. But they're there because they believe that the Constitution is a flexible thing, not something rigid that has a certain meaning. Interesting that those same two ways of interpreting the Constitution are true also of the Bible. There are many Christians over the years, or maybe even so-called Christians, who have looked at the Bible as something which is flexible. I can interpret it to whatever I think is important or whatever I want it to say, rather than the intent of the authors, which is what we learned last year in Bible class, right? That you need to understand what did the author mean, not what do I want it to mean. And those two theories of interpretation are true in both those areas. All right, so today there are many of our presidents in past years who have governed poorly, and maybe in some areas poorly, in other places not, but where they have done it poorly oftentimes is related to the idea that they think that they have powers that the Constitution doesn't give them, or think they don't have powers that the Constitution does give them, but are acting in a way which is unconstitutional, and so not following the Constitution. That's the greatest danger in a government. Now, to an extreme, we have that, we can see that in other countries. For example, in the old Soviet Union, which of course was a communist country, in which the people had very few freedoms. Liberty was not something that was valued. Everything was run by the state, including the economy. And it was illegal for groups of people to meet together, especially for religious purposes. You might be arrested for having a Bible. All right, but in the Soviet Union, they would always point to their constitution and say, "See, look at our constitution. We have religious freedom here in the Soviet Union," because their constitution had all that. Their constitution was a great constitution. They just didn't follow it. In fact, the guy who wrote their constitution was sent to Siberia for his ideas. He wrote their constitution. It had all kinds of freedoms. So you can have a great constitution, but if you don't follow it, just like Hayden said about your parents, you know, great parents, but if you don't follow what they say, then it doesn't do you much good. All right, so hopefully you've gotten the point from beating that dead horse over and over again. Let's see. Let's look over at handouts 2 and 3. which talk more about George Washington's role in founding the government. This article talks about the concept of charisma. What is charisma? You familiar with that term, are you not? What is charisma? How would you define it? Brady, how would you define charisma?
The ability by a person's very presence to dominate the world around him or her.
Wow, that came out of your mind.
Yeah.
After it first came through your eye gate looking at the paper that was there. Okay, can you put that in your own words?
Just being able to influence, like, yeah, better than other people, like,
Mhm.
basically dominate.
Okay, so you're able to influence other people. What is it about a person that gives them charisma so that they do influence other people? What do you see, Steve?
Height.
Pardon me?
Height.
Height. Sometimes people look up to, and no pun intended, to others that are tall. They're taller than them, right? And did George Washington have that going for him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was taller than the vast majority of men. All right. What else tends to make people a person influential? Sally?
Their attitude.
Attitude, like what?
Well, like if you have like a really good attitude about things, then you're gonna probably influence people to think more positively about a situation. But if you have like a really negative attitude about everything,
Mhm.
then people are gonna see that, and they're either gonna disregard it and say like they worry too much, or they're gonna start to like fall into that negativity.
So you're thinking about electing somebody, you might be more predisposed to elect somebody who is positive rather than somebody who is negative, always pointing out the negative. Yeah, that can be true. Can you think of a politician, whether it's a president or someone else that you think portrayed a very positive attitude?
Ronald Reagan.
Pardon me?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, yeah. Because he talked about, because at that time, America was in a very bad place. The morale of America was down. The economy was low. Our relationship with other countries was bad. The Cold War was going on. And you could just sense it. If you lived at that time, you could sense that there was basically a depression, not economic, although we were close to that, but there was a depression in the country. And Reagan came along and talked about how great America was and how we can do this, we can restore what we once had, and we can be the best nation in the world and all those things. And that really had an effect on people. And it happened. When he became president, I mean, you could almost sense a change in attitudes in the country. That's a very good example. Can you think of another one? Anybody? Anybody else come to mind?
John Kennedy.
John Kennedy was a very positive person, yeah. So one of the great things he said in his inaugural address, do you remember what he said in his inauguration speech? A very famous statement, which kind of rallied the people. He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." That's pretty inspiring stuff. All right. Anybody else come to mind? All right. Any other qualities you can think of that would qualify as charisma?
Confidence.
Confidence. And normally, if you're going to be a politician, you've got to have a lot of confidence, right? Who would you say exudes confidence?
Trump.
Yeah, Donald Trump exudes confidence, doesn't he? I mean, you could point out, that he's wrong totally, without error, and he still, would have confidence that he's right, no matter what. Great amount of confidence, and he loves to fire people, and fire up people too, I guess. All right, any other aspects of charisma that you think are important? All right, that's pretty good. And if we look back through history, you can see this of a lot of people. I mean, you think about Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, Franklin D. Roosevelt, all kinds of leaders throughout history that we would say had charisma. and people were influenced by them. Now, is it possible that a leader could have charisma and turn out to be evil?
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Who would be an example of that?
Hillary
Adolf
Clinton.
Hitler.
Hitler is a prime example, right?
Hillary Clinton. Joking.
I'm not sure about charisma with that one. Hitler had a lot of charisma, didn't he? I mean, he won the German people over to his side, and part of it was he was positive. Now, he was not tall. Sorry, Stephen.
Yeah.
But he had those other qualities going for him. But he had an evil heart and used his power for evil. Another example? Can you think of another one?
Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, Putin seems to do some evil things.
Yeah.
In his relationship to other countries around and just his own control.
Stalin.
Stalin definitely was an evil man. Okay, so charisma isn't always a positive thing. Now, is charisma or charismatic leadership more important in a democracy as opposed to a monarchy or another form of government? Is charisma more important in a democracy than in a monarchy? Yeah, I'm seeing shakes of the head, yes. Why? Joey?
Because the monarchy, the people don't really get a say in it. It's just like the king or queen making the decision. And like the democracy, like you need to persuade the votes,
Mm-hmm.
the morale of the people.
Right, exactly. Yeah. A king or queen, they're going to be there no matter what anybody thinks. So their charisma doesn't matter so much, except for maybe inspiring the nation. You know, I think of Great Britain with the monarchs. There had several monarchs that inspired the nation. Think of Queen Elizabeth I. She gave a great speech to rally the people behind her to stand against the invasion of Spain. What?
Nothing.
And so there are times when a monarch maybe needs to have a little charisma, but it's not as important as in a society where people are elected. How do you think mass media has affected the concept of charisma? Or even the importance of charisma? That might be a good question too, either one of those. How has the mass media affected charisma when we're talking about politics? You have an idea, Caleb?
I mean, it would increase how much we know about them, just because in old times you just had to actually see them to learn about them.
Mm-hmm. In fact, let's say until the modern age of mass communication, let's say up through the 1800s, how did most people know about a candidate? Would they have even seen? Would most people have even seen in person the candidate? Not like today we can see them on TV and you get to know them pretty well. So how would they know about a candidate? Newspapers. So either what was written about them or what they wrote themselves. And back in those times, if a person was running for office, let's say for president, they would do a lot of writing. They would write essays. They would write, full pages or even full page or pages in a newspaper, and people would read all that and say they would get to know what the person thought. So today, that's not the case. Today, people's opinion about a politician is based more on what? What would you say?
Media.
Media. And what do they get? What do we get from the media concerning candidates?
Biased opinion.
Pardon me?
A biased opinion.
A biased opinion, depending on the media person. Would it work for a person running for president to write a several page summary of what they believe? Yeah, they sometimes do that. Sometimes you maybe even seen a politician say, check my website for all the stuff I would do, but how many people do that? Go there and do that. because we don't want to take the time, right? We're busy with other things like video games and really important stuff like that, Facebook. To really understand what a candidate believes. So we base it all on the image that we see, the image that's given to us, the comments that are given to us, the bumper stickers we see on cars. So would you say charisma has become more important as mass media has increased?
Yes.
If we understand charisma as being, and what we see, our impression of somebody, it sure seems that way. We're no longer looking for depth of understanding or character, we're looking at how a person portrays themselves, how they come across. In handout number 2, in the second column, take a look there. There's a quotation that I hope you highlighted as you were reading from Washington, in which he says, "There is virtue at the bottom." Is this more likely to be the belief of a person who favors a republic or a person who favors a monarchy? There is virtue at the bottom. What do you think, Nate?
For public,
Why?
because they find it like virtue in the bottom, like the lower class, those are the people that get stuff done because you want them.
Just because, well, are there more people on the bottom in a republic than there are under a monarchy? Is that what you're saying?
Not really.
So what are you saying, Nate? I thought you were saying something really good, but then you went off into that. There's more of them.
I don't know.
What did you say before you said there's more of them?
The people that get stuff done.
Okay. What do you mean by virtue? We need to talk about that. What does virtue mean? Joey?
It's like the good characteristics of a person.
Yeah. So someone who believes in a republic, Nate says, is more likely to believe that there's virtue at the bottom, good characteristics of people at the bottom. Whereas in a monarchy, they wouldn't believe that. What would a monarchist believe? Where would he believe that the virtue resides? Steph?
Like the crops.
Yeah, right, exactly. And don't really care about the dregs of society, right, at the bottom. So Washington is a believer in the good qualities of the American people, from the bottom up, and it has to come from the bottom up. Turn now to the, is the bell gonna ring? No. Not, we have about 8 minutes, okay. Turn to the handouts 4 and 5, which are looking at George Washington's world. George Washington's world. All right, I want you to look through these handouts. And let's see, let's limit ourselves, first of all, to America. I want you to pick out what you think are the most important events in America on student handout 4, just on that one page. Just a couple of the important events. What do you think? What would you say are the most important events here in America? First column. Anything stand out as being a really important event? Devin?
Congress created the Supreme
Tell us what
Court,
year.
1789.
Okay.
Congress created the Supreme Court, named John Jay as first Chief Justice.
Okay, that's an important thing, that the Supreme Court was created. That's part of what the Constitution said to do. Anybody else? Caleb?
1791, when the Bill of Rights were ratified.
Right, first 10 amendments. Good.
1790, the first national census of the U.S. population.
All right, first national census. Why did there need to be a census? Why would you have to know how many people there are? For taxes. And what, Mohammed?
Population.
Yeah, it is the population for what purpose?
Representation.
For representation. Remember, you've got one House of Congress that is based upon population. So in order to do that, you need to know what the population is, right? Okay. One more. Anybody get one more, Sally?
In 1792, the formation of the Democratic Republican Party.
Okay, why is that so important?
Because because in the Democratic Republican Party, they tended to clash a lot with the Federalists,
Mhm.
and so it created a lot of conflict, and then the Federalists eventually kind of disappeared, and they were taken over, and then we have the Democratic Republican Party that ended up being.
Okay, so well, let's get back to this very beginning. What is the significance of the Democratic Republican Party being formed? Don't look at what happens later, but just what the formation of it is important. Why? It's the first political party. Something that the authors of the Constitution did not envision. They did not write a constitution for a government in which there would be political parties. And yet here we have very early on the formation of a political party, and all the things that Sally mentioned there would be the result of that. Hey, one more thing I would pick out, 1793, Eli Whitney invents the cotton gin. Why would I pick that out as an important event? Alex?
It helped with the Industrial Revolution.
Okay. That's part of it. Kayla? It made slavery profitable. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, let's look at, on handout 4, look at George Washington. What would you say are the most important events in his life as you look down through there? Lydia?
In 1789, he was inaugurated as the first president.
Okay, that's got to stand out, right? Inauguration as first president of the United States. Alex?
In 1790, he signs the first copyright law.
Oh, okay, why is that important? What's a copyright law? What's a copyright law do? Sally?
It stops you from stealing somebody else's idea.
Right. If you didn't have copyright laws, what would be the result? Michaela?
Nobody would be making any profit because everybody else would be copying their idea.
If you had an idea, if you wrote a book, if you wrote a song, whatever it is, somebody else could copy that and make money off of it, and you wouldn't. What effect would that have? Besides the person who had the idea not making any money. What other effect would that have? Michaela?
The country not a lot of income tax and property tax and stuff because the person could make enough money from their invention. They couldn't make it.
All right, if a person couldn't make enough money from their inventions, whatever it is, what are they likely to do?
Not there.
Yeah, they're not going to put any effort into inventing something else or writing something else, right, if they can't make the money from it. So that would decrease productivity of the intellectual variety. You know who it was that pushed and pushed for this first copyright law? Noah Webster. Why? He had written what's called the blueback speller. It was the first speller that had words strictly for Americans, with American pronunciations. Later, then he wrote the dictionary. But the blueback speller, he put a lot of effort into and was going around the country selling it. But then he would come across copies of his speller that other people were selling. Well, he had put years and years and years of effort into it, Somebody else comes along, makes just copies it, prints their own, and sells it, and they're making money from it. And there's Webster without having the income. And so he pushed and pushed for this. All right, so that was an important thing. It really, maybe more than what you might think. Okay, and what else? Anything else you see in Washington's life on handout 4? Michaela.
In 1791, Washington signed the law chartering the Bank of the United States.
All right, and that's going to create a lot of controversy as well, but an important part of Hamilton's plan. All right, anything else? All right, let's go to the world. What happened in the world of importance from 1789 to 1793? Sally.
Beginning with the French Revolution in 1789.
Yeah, really important. How many of you feel like you know a little bit of something concerning the French Revolution? You know a little bit about it? How many feel like they know quite a bit about it? Okay, I didn't expect anybody to say that they did. Yeah, a very important thing, and that's going to have an impact on the United States as well. Okay, what else? Sally?
The storm of the Bastille in
Yeah.
1789.
Yep, that's a part of the French Revolution. The Bastille was what?
It was like
A prison.
they went into it.
Yeah. And they still celebrate that today, Bastille Day, July 14th. All right, we'll be back tomorrow and look some more at the timeline and continue our preparation for watching George Washington, the forging of a nation.